Welcome to Costa Rica Real Estate and Investing. This week, we discuss architecture and construction with Richard Hammond, co-owner and chief architect of the Inverse project. Him and his team have built and constructed all the way from the northern parts of Guanacaste to the southern parts of the Osa Peninsula. So let's get straight into it. And remember, if you have any questions for future guests, please put them in the comments and subscribe. Morning, Richard. How are you doing this morning?
Richard, I'm great. Thanks a lot. How are you?
Very, very good. Thank you. Very, very good. Well, let's get straight into it because I'm sure that anyone listening to this, kind of wants to get to the meaty part straight away. So we'll go straight on with the straight into the questions. Today we're going to be talking, as I mentioned, about construction and also architecture here in Costa Rica. I can't think of anyone more educated in doing that, and especially kind of had trial by fire than you, Richard. So, I mean, in your opinion, what's the one thing that they don't tell you about when wanting to build in Costa Rica?
I think it's just how diverse Costa Rica is in terms of a place to build. I think people think, oh, it's a tropical place and, I'm going to build a tropical house. But it varies so much from coast to coast, the mountain regions, actually the microclimates, the amount of, it's interesting, actually, Costa Rica is half the size of Ohio, right?
Right.
But you wouldn't think that. I mean, it takes you 8 hours to drive across Costa Rica. And the amount of different terrains you go through. I mean, we live here in the hills of San Antonio, and it gets cold here. People wouldn't think that in Costa Rica. You've got humid conditions, but somehow the humidity here is often not as bad as people think because we often have ocean breezes. So I think there's kind of this cliche that you're going to be building in a jungle, but then you've got this thing called dry forest, which is in the northwest part of the country, which has a totally different it's a totally different scenario. And I think it's that variety that people don't expect. And that's what makes Costa Rica fascinating. I say, if you took Costa Rica and you flattened it, you took an iron and you flattened it, it would be the size of Texas. I mean, it's so lumpy, and there's so much to discover. So I think that's the thing people don't expect is, I don't think they realize how hard it is to find a place to actually to build or develop or whatever. Because once you get into it, you're like, okay, the pros. If you get into pros and cons of different places, you drive yourself crazy because there's so many pros and cons in different places, and it's tough actually. I think that's what is hard. If you're gonna pick a spot, you kind of want to get it right. Yeah. But then once you pick a spot, you suddenly start thinking, well, maybe I prefer the mountain. Maybe it's more trees. I don't know. It's a funny thing. So I think it's the variety is very surprising, especially if you haven't been here or spent time.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, just, traveling from this country, if you travel from north to south, you'll see it, the southern area being, more tropical, more rainforest. And don't forget, it's called a rain forest for a reason. It does rain down there. Whereas the dry tropical forests up in the northern part of Costa Rica are completely different. I mean, how does that, you mentioned different areas there. I mean, what would be your advice to anyone looking to kind of build here in Costa Rica or even buy when it comes to choosing an area?
Well, I think when you choose areas, it often it's about the area, but it's also about the individual site.
Right.
Because sometimes you can get an amazing site, and that will drive you into that area.
Yep.
So sometimes it's not just about going from macro to micro. Sometimes the site itself can be so special that it makes you embrace that area. So it's not as, I think, you can talk in generalized things. You want to be able to walk to the beach. I mean, that's often a nice thing. There's some places where that's easier than others. Or you like to be in mountain areas. I mean, there's very different, as I said, microclimates and different topographies and also different, amounts of rain, that changes.
Yeah.
So, unless you kind of get it, you have to find the feel. I think a lot of people I find react like they just have a good feeling about a place. And, I react really well to the south, with, it's a more tropical, more Amazon-like.
You mean
places?
Dominical, further south, all the way down
Dominical, Vita, going south. It's still fairly undeveloped. It's got mountains near the coast, which is only a few places in Costa Rica where you have actual bigger mountains by the beach. which is down there, or in like Santa Teresa and Le Mans, you get a little bit of that. To me, that's appealing. Okay, as an architect, I'm looking at topographical things. I mean, there's obviously all cultural things, like if you want to have a lot of activity or restaurants or nightlife, that's maybe the more developed areas in Guanacaste, let's say. If you're more adventurous and you want space and a sense of being a bit detached, then maybe it's more in the south or in the central Nicoya area.
Yep.
There it's got that feeling of just still being detached. You kind of have to get on a dirt road. Sometimes that's great. I mean, it's happened a few times to me that they pave a dirt road and you're like, damn,
yeah,
why did they do that? It was cool. You got on the dirt road, it was bumpy, and
it keeps the tourists out, right? When the road's a little bumpy, unless the people that really want to go there.
Yeah, when they paved Le Mans, I was like disappointed. I was like, it kind of, yeah, it no dust. The dust is crazy in places like Nasara, and that's being dealt with.
Yep.
But yeah, picking an area, it's hard to go wrong in the sort of well-known spots. I think in Costa Rica, they all have great attributes, and I think without traveling, it's hard to say. And as I said, it appeals to individuals and their individual tastes.
So, I mean, your suggestion to people would be look at quite a few different sites before making a decision in kind of different areas of Costa Rica that might appeal to you.
Yeah, I think there's no substitute for spending time and going places. It's like as a designer, if we don't see the site, you can't start the project.
True.
It's the same. I think, of course, that's later in the game, but standing on that piece of land or in that area is what it's all about. I guess the issue is you fall in love too quickly sometimes, and that can be dangerous. You have to.
It's not a bad thing, though, right? I'm sure we've all done it in our life.
Yes, I mean it's a great motivator.
Yep.
You want to prove everybody wrong sometimes. This is great. I'll make it work.
Wow. I mean, we spoke with Roberto Meza, I think, in 2 podcasts back about the buy versus build. Meaning, is it better to buy something and kind of that's already existing and kind of refurbish it, or expand on it, or change it slightly, or build from scratch? I mean, what's your opinion of which one's best and why?
I'm going to say the same thing again. Depends on so many factors. However, there's good reasons to do both.
Yep.
And there's not one versus the other. Now, the space we're in, for example, this is our home and studio in San Antonio, and this was an existing small, unfinished kind of a ruin, let's say,
right.
that I think most people would have demolished and started again because it has, it's a nice lot. It's got nice views. We took the decision to keep the main structure, remove a lot of it, and open it up. So in the end, it becomes a very contemporary, progressive space, let's say. But we kept the inherent structure for 2 reasons: three reasons. Cost reasons, speed, because it had water hookups and electricity was already here.
Yep.
And then cost, because the structure was in place. So those factors, did I say 3? I forget. But so in this case, it made sense to keep the existing, but we did. When we do that type of thing, we believe in transformation, because often what exists needs to be transformed. In fact, the challenge for us was to create something you would not know that there was an existing building here.
Right.
You would never know that it was an old ruin. So I think the architect could do that. Can take something, transform it in such a way that you couldn't recognize it, modernize it, because often build something existing. So for sustainability reasons, a lot of older structures you wouldn't build it that way today.
Yep.
Of course. So you have to upgrade. Now the upgrading part, depending on what it is, if it has a metal roof, it probably has no insulation, you can add that. You can upgrade and fix certain things. Some things structural things much harder to fix. So having an engineer look at an existing building, making sure that it's structurally sound, hasn't had any issues, if a building's older, 10 years, you'll know pretty quickly that if there's issues, because there's probably been a few earthquakes in that time.
Yeah.
The cracks would have shown. You could tell. So you can do it. I think from a sustainability point of view. That's the third thing. Sustainability wise, if you use an existing footprint, you're not impacting the environment as much as starting a brand new project. So your environmental impact is less when you use an existing or upgrade or renovate an existing structure. But going new, of course, then you can design your dream. If you can create something from scratch, you can work with the architect and realize what it is you really you've been dreaming about. And I think that's why people come to Costa Rica. They have a dream. Mostly, I think they want to create something that's interesting and exciting and takes into account all the beautiful things of the country. And also some people are very particular. I think you really have a good idea of what you want, the way you want it. And sometimes we've had people that have come to us after months of looking at existing properties, and eventually they say, okay, nothing works. Just there's something wrong with everything.
Yep.
It's like it would be great, but then we've got to rip this out and move that and do this and do that, and we might as well let's just start from scratch. So the starting from scratch part, that's a longer journey.
How long does that typically take? Just for listeners to just have a rough idea. I mean, I know it could be as my father always said, it depends. It's how long's a piece of string. Well, however long you want it. But I mean, typically in Costa Rica, if somebody's building, say, I don't know, 250, 300 square meters. I'm terrible in feet. Maybe you can translate that very easy because I know that you've done a lot of work up in the US before. But I mean, how long is that typically taking?
So the process is, everything's done in phases. We like to break things down to bite-sized chunks so that people understand what gets done in which phase. The decision-making process. It's a incremental process. But typically you've got the design and permitting phase, and then obviously the construction phase. Those are the two main things. So the design phase, you've got essentially 3 or 4 major steps, and then you've got once you've gone from first your concept design. Actually, we start a little bit earlier in a visioning phase where we really try to understand the vision of the client, what it is all of their ideas, and we embrace all of that, and then turn that around into a vision statement, which we then use to come up.
How do you pull that out of someone though? Because I'm sure sometimes these clients don't. I mean, that's got to be difficult because I mean, it's really is you're producing art for someone, right?
Yeah, it comes a lot from experience of just dealing with people, and I mean, in some ways, it's a mix of science and psychology. I mean, it's a weird blend of things that go into it. Now, we do exercises. We believe in conversation, so we have lots of conversations. We like to really get to know our clients, and a house is very personal, and we want the clients to feel very comfortable with us. You get into very personal details. You talk about often with couples, and sometimes it brings up. It's amazing actually. Design can bring up issues that they didn't even know they had when it comes down to choosing which side the flush on the toilet is going to be, right? It's interesting. They never knew this was an issue until they have to make the decision. But how do you bring it out? You asked. So we like to bring people into our studio. It's more difficult now, but we like to be in the same space for a day at least. Sometimes on the site, or we do it near the site, and we just have conversations. We record it. We go through exercises. We will show them images. Images are dangerous. Everybody has a Pinterest. Everybody's got a Instagram, favorites list.
Yep.
We'll show images, but we'll always get into the why of that image. What is it you like about that image? You can show a picture. There's there's 1,000 things in an image that you like. You might think you like it because it's the architecture, but it might just be because it's got nice lighting, but you didn't really realize that. You didn't know why you liked it. So we like to get into the why you like things. What do you like? What don't you like? We do exercises like a day in the life. So we'd ask you, what is a perfect day for you? Like, how does it unfold? What would you do in the morning? What would you do at lunchtime, the afternoon? Once we take these kinds of things, we do drawing exercises. We do some, we have a number of exercises we go through. We condense all of that into a report, and then we come up with what we call design drivers, which is a series of statements and keywords that frame the project right from the beginning. Now, those are very important, and we keep them up front in the presentations always. It's very interesting how quickly you forget what you said you were going to do at the beginning.
Well, I mean, it's no different than the mission, vision, values of a business, right? Sometimes, you lose them pretty quickly.
Get lost. Architecture is about the weeds. You get into the weeds, like, I don't know. Here's an example. Here's a doorstop. What's the doorstop?
Yep.
Now, why is there a door there to begin with? Should be the question. But it's that. So it's the and we do it very graphically and very visually. These vision documents. It's not all text. And we hold that as kind of the mantra for the project. Every project's different. We don't like to do. And if you look at our work, it's diverse. I mean, you could probably see a theme, but it's not repeated. It's not our vision. So it's a blend of our vision, the client's vision, the constraints of the site. It's all feeding into each other. The architect's job is really a synergizer or a blender of information. Our job is to take all this information, all the programming requirements, the client's vision and dreams, all the permitting and cost issues, blending all that together, coming up with this vision. We ask the client to then look at that, this document that we produce, and is this correct? Is this the right? Before we start drawing, let's make sure we're on the right page.
Yep.
And then we get into concept design, which would be the first sketches. Actually, I've got some examples here. We build little models, like this. Really starts to give you a flavor and a feel for the way that the shape of the project. That's called the concept.
Yep.
And normally that can take up 4 weeks, let's say a month. And then once we get feedback, comments, then we go into the next phase, which is we call design development, which is more about getting the engineers involved, and starting to figure out sizes and spaces and depths of beams. That's another 4 or 5 weeks. And once that's all agreed, the clients, we presented this, they agreed to these things, then we move on to the technical documents, which takes a couple months.
Right.
And we always say about 8 to 10 weeks. The technical documents, which is the hardline drawings.
Yep.
Now, the thing is, I'd say is that we don't believe that clients need to understand those drawings, and they shouldn't have to. I've seen it happen where, they walk into the site, onto the projects, and they look at them and say, "Oh, why is that there?" And I cannot say it was in the technical documents and you didn't check it. That's not your job. That's not your responsibility. That's our responsibility to convey the information to you early in the design phase.
Yep.
So that you understood. So what we like to do is really make our clients understand what they're getting. And it's difficult to understand what you're getting. I can show you a model like this. I can show you a rendering. I can show you floor plans. I've got some props here, but we'll show that we'll do this, and we've got the virtual reality thing.
That's pretty cool.
This one I think works really well because it gives you a sense of size. It puts your eye height at the right height.
Right.
If you look at a rendering, which is quite common these days, you can get an idea, but you don't really know how high something is or how far something feels. In the virtual reality that we do, you really kind of puts you in the space, and you're like, we always get this aha. It's like, I get it now.
Yeah.
Some people don't read even models. Some people can't put themselves in that scale because it's small, and some people plan can also be a little bit deceiving sometimes. So we like to use different techniques, because if I get a sense that the client's not understanding the design, that's a red flag.
Yep.
They might say, yeah, I get it. I'm like, do you really get it? Do you know? Because if you don't, we show all the materials. We have boxes of materials. This is what it feels like. This is what it looks like. These are what we call them palettes. We put together material palettes. So you know what you're getting. I mean,
you've been doing this for a long time, right? How many years?
Yeah.
How many years?
Oh, I graduated in '97 in South Africa.
Okay.
Worked a few years there, then moved to the US in '99, and I got my architecture license in California. So yeah, a couple decades, but and I've worked on many different scales of architecture, from stadiums to convention centers, towers, hotels. All of those experiences feed into the process, and it's I don't think anybody should really specialize too specifically in architecture, because all of those things feed in. So we'll do residential projects. It's not what it's not. We don't only do that. And the more we do, the more different. Hospitality feeds into residential.
Yep.
We do. I've worked on art galleries. These kinds of cultural projects can influence hospitality. There's a cross-pollination of ideas, and I think that the more of that, the better.
So, I mean, to summarize, Richard, I mean, this design phase, as you said, there's like a design and then kind of an engineering construction size. The design phase, I mean, can be as long as the client wants, till really that you get a sense that they are like, yeah, this is what we want. I mean, but are you talking 2-3 months for that, would you say? Just in general?
Okay, so as I said, the vision part is a week. I mean, that's just really a meeting. It's just summarizing. And then the concept phase, we can take, it can be a month to a month and a half. It depends on the back and forth that happens. We like to get approval, so we move forward. So we like to put raw line in the sand, so that, because change is your enemy in this business. Change is your enemy. It costs money, it causes frustration, it blows your budget. So we really like to do as much as we can to get decisions made, so that we can move forward to the next more detailed phases. We don't like to draw it out too long. I mean, if the concept phase, it can't be long.
So I mean, we're talking 1.5 to 2 months on that concept phase. The whole. Even
less, I would say. It's I mean, the concept is, and again, this is not in concept. We're not picking the finishes. We don't know what the finish is. We might know that we're going to use concrete. We're going to use tiles. We're going to use metal. Basic ideas like that, but not detailed choices. But that's going to take you. It takes us a month to do that first, after that vision part's been done.
So we got a week.
We don't like to
we got a month.
Take too long.
We got a week. We got a month. What else in that? Just that starting stage before. I mean, even you've moved to more of I mean, the constructional drawings, getting permitting, the construction. I mean, is that still a month and a half? Would you say, or would you say that's a bit longer because you guys have still got to do all the?
No, that's longer. That's longer. So that first month plus that week of so the first month is the concept phase, and then we get into the more technical side. The technical's got two parts to it. It's sort of an initial phase, which is kind of like halfway, and then we present that to the client, and then go into more detail. But we're looking at about 3 months for that second part.
Okay, so I mean, that phase maybe anywhere from 4 to 5 months, and the whole capitalizing it. Well, right. Kind of, I mean, and then
the whole process could be 6 months at the most, but I think 4 to 5 months, depending on size, depending on complexity. We like to dovetail permitting into this process. So while the thing is, we're getting these documents ready, we can actually get drawings into the building department before we've finished, because usually they don't need the drawings as detailed as the ones we're going to build with. So we can have parallel running tracks, and that can save time. Oftentimes, people want to move quickly, so that's one way to do that.
And then
let's say 4 to 5 months is kind of a good number to say.
I think the people need to remember is that some people might be going, wow, 5 months is a long time. But again, for a lot of the times this is someone's dream house they're building. I mean, this part is probably the most essential stage of it's like the foundations of building a house. They need to be strong and everything needs to be clear, because once you've done it, making the changes is going to be painful and costful.
Right.
Yeah,
I think people can often jump in too quickly now. I think if you're looking at different architects, you might want to ask them, what do your concept presentations look like? What do you show us? And not just a rendering, because a rendering does not tell you anything about the choices of light, choices of the fans, what type of kitchen you're going to be putting in there, whether it's a custom or whether it's imported, pre-manufactured, all these kinds of decisions.
I'm going to come back to that point, because I think choosing an architect is a question that I'd like to ask you, because I like to ask everyone, like even a realtor, how do you choose a realtor? Or, even asking a construction guy, how do you choose a construction guy? But so just to kind of, because I just want to kind of wrap this up, because I'm sure the readers are just like, dude, just tell me how long it's going to take me to kind of go from, from start to end here.
Not beating about the bush.
Yeah. So from like 4 to 5 months is the kind of the concept visualization phase. You've already, as you said there, kind of in parallel set in the, you've already placed in the drawings with the municipalidad and everything you need to do there. I mean, how long after that phase then? We're at 5 months. How long until, like, basically I've got the keys in my hand and I'm ready to move in?
Anywhere from 7 to 12 months.
Yep.
Something complicated can go longer than that.
Yep.
But seven months to a year, again, depending on. Often it's the amount of site work can slow you down. Like if there's a lot of excavation, a lot of often if you're building, say by the beach, you might have to resubstitute soil because it's very sandy, and do compaction and a lot of preparation. So sometimes just getting to that slab it looks like it's just nothing there, but actually that could take a couple months just to get to that point on some projects. That kind of talks about how you're going from 7 months to 12 months. Yeah. Well, also your choice of structural system. Are you going to be building a concrete block? Or are you going to be pouring concrete? Or are you going to be using a steel frame? These are all decisions that do play into that.
Yeah.
And there's many factors that drive these different decisions. But yeah, so you're looking at.
I mean, it sounds like 12 months.
Year and 3 months,
yeah.
Start to finish.
Okay.
Maybe as a very aggressive. It'd be hard to do it in a year. That would be very aggressive, but just over that.
Okay, great.
You got to factor in the weather. The weather is another factor.
Well, I mean, that's something that we talked about earlier, depending on where you are in Costa Rica. And I think that could potentially have an impact on construction as well, because the south is, it rains a lot more than the north, right?
Right.
But I mean, that's the beauty.
It depends on the year, the cycle. Some years are very wet. Last year we had was a ridiculously wet year.
Yep.
We were building in the beach in the Rios area.
The Central Pacific.
During that time, and we actually was doing a lot of site work, and it turned out that we didn't have hardly any delays, which is interesting. It was the wettest year in the 8 years I've been in Costa Rica. That's by far the wettest year.
Yep.
But what tended to happen is it rained later in the day. They were able to work in the mornings. So sometimes the common wisdom is never build in the rainy season. Well, it's doable, and I think the contractors here know how to deal with it. It's sort of a fact of life. I would say maybe the main excavation, sometimes if you start doing that in May, June.
Yeah, which is the start of the kind of the rainy season, right? Yeah. It runs from like May, June, all the way through till probably like, what would you say, October, November time?
Yeah, end of November.
So when is best to start a project in Costa Rica, in your opinion?
I think it's great to start just after Christmas. Everyone's back.
Yep.
After New Year, in the New Year. So if you can get going on the 5th of January, that's really good. It's dry season. You've got all the way till May to get the major work done.
Yep.
I don't know. Starting in the end of the year is tough because actually the rain actually ramps up towards October, November. You get this kind of a really wet period. So that might be avoided to start then, and then you
want your roof on by then.
Right. Exactly. And then the builders' holidays here are everything shuts down over the Christmas New Year periods and nothing happens. Even a little bit before that, things just seem to just kind of depends. Some contractors are great; they work right up to the last day, but sometimes you feel like there's a little bit of getting orders in, getting things delivered, things do slow down.
No, we've seen that. So the question that I asked before, which again I ask most people, is so I'm looking to build my dream house here in Costa Rica. I'm looking for an architect. How would I go about making sure that I get a great architect? What questions should I be asking? What should be the red flags? I mean, how should it feel, basically, in your opinion, when you know that you've met the right person or company?
Well, obviously, I think people will get recommendations through realtors and friends.
Yep.
And usually, or online. So this, and you can do basic searches and find the names. I mean, there's a lot of architects in Costa Rica, local architects that are great. And Costa Rica has actually quite a good tradition of architecture in terms of architecture schools. there's actually quite a few.
Yep.
San Jose. So there's a lot to choose from, and it might feel a little bit overwhelming. But I do think just meeting with the architects and getting a sense of what's the chemistry. Do they understand where I'm coming from, what I'm looking for? Is just that's a very important thing, I think, because this person or this team you're going to be working with for a very long time, through ups and downs sometimes, and you just really have to have a good relationship, and really trusting relationship. I think it's important to call other clients of that architect.
Yep.
And ask them how it went. Not just, I think, asking about how was the experience, how was the generally how they dealt with changes. Did you get what you were expecting? Just basic questions like that.
Yep.
I mean, look at the work. Obviously, I think what they've done. You can pretty easily see from websites and blogs and things like that.
How much is enough?
If the work appeals. The thing is, I think what's difficult, I guess, in Costa Rica is that anybody who's, once you've graduated from university, you're given a license to practice as an architect or engineer. Different to the States, where you need to go through, say, for example, you have to go through many years of training after you graduate and write many exams.
Right.
In my case, I think I had 9 exams.
Wow.
After 5 years of working, of apprenticeship, essentially.
Yep.
And then you'll be given a license. In Costa Rica, your license is given to you there's an exam, but quite quickly you basically could practice as an architect. So I think it's very important to understand the experience that the architects had. Again, I think I mentioned the understanding materials, durability, details, how things will perform over time. You're not going to get that from great renderings, and you need to just understand the experience that goes behind the team you're working with. I think and also the partners that they bring. So it's very important to ask about the engineers that they'll be bringing to the table. And their experience, because the engineers and the architects we work hand in hand. Without great engineers, you don't get a good project. It's essential.
Roberto said that because I asked him what's the most important thing, and he said getting a great architect. And I think I understand maybe a little bit further now why that is, because the architect brings the engineer, which also to an extent brings the construction company and kind of ties everything together.
Yes, and I think the experience that you have with those engineers and with certain construction companies, we can work with new teams all the time. I mean, that's fine, but often working with people that you've worked with before,
yep,
you just have this, just the synergy of that, understanding, the way it works. I think what we call coordination. You can have a great design, but if you don't coordinate the teams and all the disciplines that are under you, it falls apart.
Yeah,
and that's critical to understand how to coordinate. If the engineers are creating a drawing that doesn't match the architecture, and the guy on site's looking at architecture engineering, is like, which one do I pick?
Yep.
They usually pick the wrong one, and then they got to demolish something. And it happens all the time, and that's often because the engineering gets done too quickly. The engineers will come in and will do their drawings based on the early concept, let's say. So the architect would have created the early concept, this guy, and then the engineer comes in and says, okay, the engineer is focused more on the technical side. So that's put lights, in space. But as the architect, the lights are in the wrong place. They have to be read from the architectural drawing. So it's very important to make sure they know which drawings to read. These sound like obvious things, but it's amazing how often this goes wrong.
Difficult question I'm about to ask. I think I'm kind of just asking, because I'm just trying to generalize here, but I think that there are, there's going to be a high and there's going to be a low here. Cost of building in Costa Rica. Okay. Again, I've heard numbers from, hey dude, it can go from anywhere from $800 a square meter up to $2,500, $3,000 a square meter, even more if you want to. I mean,
Right.
to give the listeners an idea, I mean, what are they getting, say, for 1,000? So that they can kind of really go, okay, this is kind of going to give me an idea of how much it's going to cost. And what are they getting at 2,500?
Right. Okay. I think you can go at the low end. You can start talking at 1,000. That's low, but you can. You can. I think middle is 1,400, 1,500, which is decent quality. And then you can go up to 2,000, 2,500 if you really have very specific finishes, appliances, things that need to be imported that you just have to have, right? It has to be this Italian tile that, for example. At the $1,000, you're talking about just using what's locally available only.
Yep.
And probably more of a renovation project, and also being clever about how you do things. So, for example, I've got a sample here. This is a piece of concrete, polished concrete floor, right?
Yep.
So you polish like the house where we are. We polished the floor, no tiles. Looks great, but that decision saves you money. If you look up here, the ceiling, we painted. This is a typical Costa Rican concrete slab, which we didn't put a ceiling in. We just left it exposed. And all this wood you see behind me is actually plywood.
Yep.
So, it's a combination of, I think, of good design and then efficient use of materials. You can be clever and bring down that price. But if you have in your mind something you need to have, these Italian tiles and whatever, then it starts going up. And then systems, right? So if you want to have a backup generator, if you want a really great water filtration system, which is maybe not always necessary, but people think they need it sometimes. Those are if you're getting into a smart home, with light sensors and where you want to program your lighting for your house. You want to program the scenes. You want to have a space which the music turns on, or from an app. These are systems. This is pushing you over 2,000 now. You're getting higher. If you want your Windows systems, if you're getting all into there's a lot of. So I'm saying you can start at the very low end, which is 1,000, and you can go up to 2,500. That's the range. I would say. I've heard of higher. Can happen.
I'm sure.
Lower too. Lower can happen. But then you're really cutting corners, or you're being very creative. Like, for example, you make the decision, I'm going to live with no glass. I'm going to have only louvers and natural ventilation.
Yep.
Great decision if you want to save money.
Yep.
And you're living in a high elevation. You can quite quickly drop your costs. If you take out systems, you can. It's the architect should guide you through all of that and help you pick your right target.
Let's talk sustainability a bit, because again, we spoke about this with Roberto and some other people beforehand, and I know it's a focal point on a lot of the projects that you work on. What are some of the things that I wouldn't say try to push, but recommend to people based on your experience when it comes to, I don't know, things like solar power, solar hot water, this kind of stuff, where they're like, well, where it could be like, it may be more expensive at the beginning, or maybe it's not, but you're going to make the saving back very quickly, because Costa Rica there's sun here nearly 365 days a year.
Right. Well, sustainability is obviously a popular topic, and especially in Costa Rica, where sustainability is kind of it's a poster child for sustainable sustainability. Not so much in architecture, but in design, but more, in terms of reforestation and renewable energy and those things. I think in architecture it could catch up a little bit. It needs to. Costa Rica is where people expect there to be sustainable design. What does that mean even? I think to me it's just reducing your impact. In reducing your impact on the land itself. The footprint that often what really drives me kind of crazy is when when developers will go in and just clear and grade big flat, what they call plantels, right? And not knowing what's going to be designed yet. They just create a graded big flat area, take out all the trees, and then sell that, thinking that somebody's going to love this big flat area, where that might have been the worst decision. You could have kept the slope, and maybe it would be great to work with the site as it is.
Do you suggest that people have hot water?
No, but in terms of sustainability is, yeah, I think there's a lot of decisions to be made. I mean, it's from the macro decision, which is how big the house is. I mean, that's, sometimes people are talking about let's use some recycled wood, but they've got a 1,000-meter house.
Yep.
That's not the sustainable decision. Might have been to reduce the size, making more outdoor living, and that's your first step. Or if you did reuse an existing structure, that's a really good first step. And then you layer on the other sustainable decisions. I think the other thing about sustainability, it's about building something that's going to last. Because if you have to build something that has to be demolished in 30 years, or has to be completely rebuilt because it rusted, or that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
So I think longevity is great. Is a really good point. And then doing what we call passive strategies. So in Costa Rica, it's interesting. 2 times a year in Costa Rica, the sun is directly overhead. You cast no shadow. And that's really interesting. You don't get that in northern latitudes. Which means that if you have projections or overhangs over your windows, you're actually going to keep the sun out for most of the day. And you're going to keep the rain off. So it's doing 2 things. So people might bring me a Pinterest image of a beautiful Scandinavian home that has a flush facade and windows and looks great. Won't work here. It's going to the sun's going to get in, the rain is going to get in. So a simple projection is a great sustainable way to start your design, right? Because you're going to shade your glass, you're going to keep the heat out, lower your air conditioning bills. Then we can talk about solar panels and solar hot water. So I think solar hot water, number one, it's cheap to do solar hot water panels, and it covers a huge part of your electric bill. Hot water, showers, dishwasher, washing machine. Hot water is expensive to heat. Water is hard to heat. How long it takes to boil an egg. It takes a lot of energy to heat water. So once you cut out the hot water heating, then you can put on solar panels, and the price of that's coming down. And it'll pay back in 3 years. It'll pay back easily.
So your suggestion then is potentially don't do the solar panels to begin with. Do the hot water heater and see what an impact it has.
I say first do the overhangs. Once you get the overhangs done, then you do the hot water. Once you got the hot water done, then you do the electric panels.
Okay.
All 3 is great, but if you started with electric panels and said I'm going to have a glass box with electric panels, okay, you're going to need a lot of panels.
Yep.
You shouldn't walk backwards. You should go, forwards.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, great. I mean, this has been amazing. I've learned so much here. So thanks very much for giving us all this information. My last question I like to ask everyone: if you inherited $500,000, okay, and you had to invest in Costa Rica, and you had to do it, and it could be on anything, what would you do it and what would you do with it and why?
I'll put it in Bitcoin right away.
But you had to do it in Costa Rica.
Of course. I would. I think you would want to. I would build. Obviously, as a designer, I would love to do that. That would be. I would. What I would do is, I would love to build in a forest near a river. For me, that would be great. I would get a lot for 50 to 100,000, and I would invest 300,000 or 400,000 in building a sustainable, raised off the ground, progressive home. And I would probably build it for myself, knowing that when you do that, when you build things that are very tailored to your own tastes, that has appeal for people because it has a soul.
Yep.
I'd put in a rental, probably piece to it, or 2 maybe, so I could rent out parts of it or the whole thing. So it would have some kind of sustainable, income generating. But I'd probably pick something in a mountain, probably in a forest, The beaches are great, but I don't know. It's a nice thing to dream about, but I think 500 is a good number. What you're saying for a project, I think you could definitely spend more, and you could probably go less. But I think at that point, you could get a great 3 or 4 bedroom home, sustainable features that that you would never want to leave.
Awesome. Well, Rich, thanks again for your time. And for anyone that wants to contact Richard, I'll put basically all of your contact details as well as the Inverse Project's website there. Thanks very much, Rich. And I hope to get you on the podcast again at some point in the future.
That'd be great. Thanks, Richard.
Cool. Have a good one.
You too.